are these people?
Hey, did you ever hear me say journalism is not a crime? Because I've definitely said that before.
A few times.
A few times. Right? It's one of the tenets and things that we've been premised upon the entire time we've done this. Because we fought to get Julian Assange out. We fight for journalists' right to say and publish what they need to publish and publish the truth and what they see. And we also fight for the rights of the party, but no, also for immigrants, non-citizen journalists to be able to publish without fear of retribution from the government. I thought that was something that we all had, and I guess I took it for granted in this country until recently, because Indie Media Award honoree Kevin Gosztola reminds us that in the Ramacia Öztürk case, you've now got rights groups that are urging appeals court to uphold the rights of non-citizen journalists. This is potentially a precedent setter. So as Kevin writes, several press freedom and First Amendment groups have urged a United States appeals court to side with Tufts University graduate student Ramacia Öztürk and non-citizen journalists. Now, we covered Ramacia Öztürk's arrest. We covered her release from the detention center down in Louisiana. All right, this is a picture of the appeals court, Second Circuit in Manhattan. All right, this is a paid article. I am a paid supporter of Kevin Gosztola and the Dissenter. Again, we support independent, real, true independent media here, not just with showing their stuff on the show, but also with our wallet. Several press freedom and First Amendment groups have urged a U.S. appeals court to side with Ramacia Öztürk. Thank you. Thank you for supporting independent media. Okay. And uphold the court's authority to review unconstitutional detention claims brought by non-citizens, which certainly has happened. All right. On March 25th, Ramacia Öztürk famously was on the streets of Somerville, Mass, near Boston, when Immigration, Customs, and Enforcement, ICE, agents abducted her from the streets. It was widely reported that she was detained because she co-authored an op-ed in the university's student newspaper. The op-ed criticized university administrators for not engaging with students who sought divestment from companies with ties to Israel after the Israeli government engaged in the deliberate starvation and indiscriminate slaughter of Palestinian civilians and plausible genocide. That's quote unquote from her article. Öztürk, for her crime, was held in an ICE women's prison in Louisiana for a little over a month until a U.S. court ordered her release in May. But prior to her release, the president's administration appealed the lower court decision that paved the way for her return to Massachusetts. The government insisted that the courts had no authority to review her claim of unlawful detention. All right. The Reporters for Freedom of the Press, along with the CPJ, PEN America, Reporters Without Borders, and the Student Press Law Center all submitted a brief to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. All indications are that Öztürk spent more than a month in immigrant detention in Louisiana and had her student visa revoked because she co-bylined an op-ed in her university's newspaper. Her detention was based in part and possibly entirely on what is indisputably journalistic activity. A district court should be able to quickly review a habeas petition, which is essentially a person's challenge to detention or imprisonment that forces the government to produce that individual in court. Anything less would allow the executive branch to silence disfavored non-citizen journalists through an unconstitutional detention without any review of its constitutionality until a final removal order is entered and a petition for review can be filed, the press freedom groups all argued. And I remember that we talked about the guy in Atlanta who got arrested and detained, who covers protests often. They held him for days. The press freedom groups also contended that the absence of speedy judicial review would mean that specific news beats, immigration enforcement, for instance, could be chilled more than others. That presents a particularly insidious form of viewpoint discrimination. Like, they call it for what it actually is. That's exactly the case of Spanish language journalist Mario Guevara, who ICE has detained in solitary confinement for 2 months. I just mentioned that a little bit ago because we covered that on the show. In fact, in August, the ACLU filed a habeas claim on behalf of Guevara and his unconstitutional detention. Moreover, the groups invited the appeals court to recognize that the underlying provisions in the Immigration and Nationality Act referred to by the government to justify their position are unconstitutional because officials should not be able to seek the removal of non-citizen journalists based on reporting that the government says could harm foreign policy or that the Secretary of State otherwise perceives as critical or unfavorable. That's insane. I thought we had free speech in this country. I thought this was America. Come on, I know you got Randy. All right. The Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which is FIRE.
I thought this was America.
Thank you so much. All right.
Fire, 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 fire.
The National Coalition Against Censorship, the First Amendment Lawyers Association, and PEN America again asked the appeals court to more broadly recognize the implications for freedom of speech. Two civil liberties organizations, the Cato Institute, which is right-wing, and the Rutherford Institute, also supported the brief. As the groups outlined, Secretary of State Narco Rubio, not Marco, but Narco, arrested and detained Öztürk not because the government claims she committed a crime or other deportable offense, but for the seemingly sole reason that her expression, an op-ed in a student newspaper, stirred the Trump administration to anger and then to revoke her student visa. The secretary argues his discretionary power over lawfully present international students includes authority to order their arrest, detention, and deportation for even protected speech. It does not, First Amendment groups added. The groups referred to Bridges v. California, a 1941 U.S. Supreme Court decision in which a 5-4 majority upheld the free speech rights of Harry Bridges, the leader of the Longshoremen's Association. Now it's Harold Daggett. Bridges, who was born in Australia, had a case pending before the Superior Court of LA County. He sent a telegram to Secretary of Labor Francis Perkins that implied the Longshoremen's Union would go on strike if the Superior Court ruled against him. So, the Superior Court found Bridges in contempt. The LA Times, which published several editorials about the case, was also held in contempt, and both faced fines. But the First Amendment doesn't speak unequivocally, all right? It prohibits any law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It must be taken as a command of the broadest scope that explicit language read in the text of a liberty-loving society will allow. That's Justice Hugo Black in 1941. On behalf of Stanford University's student newspaper, 2 unnamed students, FIRE, sued Rubio and Homeland Security Secretary Christy Dog Shooter Nome in August for their role in seeking to deport any lawfully present non-citizen for speech the government deems, quote, anti-American or anti-Israel. That sounds a lot like McCarthyite language, honestly. The press freedom groups made clear that the U.S. courts have rejected viewpoint discrimination as antithetical to our nation's First Amendment, and it's virtually never permitted. Yet that's what the government does when it uses its immigration enforcement authorities to thumb the scale of public discourse in its own favor. Quote, the viewpoint discrimination facilitated by the government's interpretation of the INA applied to Ms. Öztürk's op-ed is precisely the kind of poison the Constitution forbids. Really good article by Kevin. Support him. Support the Dissenter, dissenter.org, thedissenter.org, and independent media. Again, fully user-funded. Appreciate him. Another one who was a tremendous fighter for Julian Assange. He covered the trials day by day. He attended a lot of the hearings via Zoom or in person whenever he could. And he's continuing. And we said it would be interesting to see what happens to all of the journalists that support Assange, where they go after he's released, and how their careers continue to develop in the wake of his freedom. And I'm glad that Kevin has continued to support independence and to support press freedom and to talk about journalists and to defend other persecuted journalists. Appreciate what he does there. All right, before we get to the lightning round, again, support the independent media you want to see. That also includes INN, because we bring stories like that where most people won't. So if you like seeing stories like that, the ways to support this network financially and help us pay our bills, Cash App, $, Indie News Network, ko-fi.com/Indie News Network. And somebody did that a little bit ago, and I need to thank whoever that was. And was that Sean? I'm guessing. I don't know. I got to find it. I see it here. And then also, again, paypal.me/Indie News Network, IndieNewsNow.com, INNNewsletter.com, where we're about to go live at the top of the hour for boats, Smashing in Other Boats. That's our React show. And then IndieMediaToday.com, where we are live right now. And we go live every Sunday night until Substack decides that they don't like us anymore. I love you all. Support independent media because we need it more than ever. And we will see you real soon. Take care, everyone.
See you in a bit, fam.
Hasta la vista. Hasta la vista, baby.
No! We just fucking lost the stream!
Can keep giving us nothing and think we're bluffing about coming for your heads. Why play civil if you won't listen to 50,000 dead? And now we know our mission, we form a militia, make Congress a prison.